you're very welcome to Shine.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem at all. You are pretty much a beauty guru at this stage, it's fair to say. Were you always obsessed with, makeup and beauty as a kid?
Yeah, I think I was always a girly girl. Like I was definitely the teenager who couldn't get enough of, the gorgeous green and pink glitter that we used to wear going to the youth discos. I was all about it. And then I transitioned into layers and layers of black kohl pencil with no mascara and no eyebrows on. So I
Why
would
would
say I
you?
definitely was like rocking gorgeous trends before I actually trained in makeup. But I think, yeah, I always had an interest in it. I wouldn't say consider it as a career. That only happened when I ended up doing work experience on a makeup counter because I was so last minute and I had nothing organized. So I worked with
Was it
Benefit
your
actually.
transition year?
Yeah, as your work experience for 2 weeks. I worked in House of Fraser in Benefit Cosmetics and I loved it. I just loved kind of selling. I was like, oh yeah, you should buy this. This is great. And then they kindly offered me a part-time job across the way in an opposite counter called Urban Decay. So I
Okay.
worked there all
I used to
through
love
fourth, fifth,
Urban
and sixth
Decay.
year.
I was obsessed with
Oh,
Urban
I
Decay. Still
thought
am, actually.
like I had the coolest part-time job that ever existed. Like I was like, I am a mua, like
Yeah.
a makeup artist, excuse me. But no, I absolutely loved it. And you know what? At that age as well, it was so good for lots of things outside of like, finding your creative zone with makeup, but actually from a confidence perspective. Because I remember my first day, they were like, okay, you're going to go traffic stop now. And traffic stop is basically bombarding a customer in a shopping center when they're browsing shoes to be like, do you want to try mascara from Urban Decay? And I was terrified. Like, I think my first sentence that came out was just gibberish. And I think the woman felt so bad for me. She came and sat down and bought something just out of pity. But it was actually brilliant over the next few years having that.
It is great for those just like building that confidence, because it's so funny you said that it was a last minute work experience, because mine was the same. It was a last minute work experience for a local paper, and just that, like, I left it so late that man traipsized me around the town and was like, go in there now and see what they take you, and they did. And I was like, hey, and then I looked back and I was like, how daft. I went in on a Thursday and was like, hey, can you take me on Monday? And they were like, yeah, of course. And that's kind of shaped my career as well. But I remember
Oh,
being so terrified because, but here at home we had a landline. I'm sure there's people watching this that'll be like, what on earth is a landline? But we had a
me
landline, a
too.
phone in the house, and I would refuse as a teenager to answer it because I was so shy. But over
Yeah,
there, I had to pick up the phone and call people and stuff as well. So
yeah,
I definitely think TY work experience and just work experience in general just really kind of pushes you out of your comfort zone a bit.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the best years, I would say, from like a formative perspective that I had in secondary school. Not that I acknowledged that at the time, but like looking back now, it was absolutely brilliant. And it has definitely, like you said, shaped what I'm doing now as a career.
Yeah. And how did you go then? Because, as you said, you had the coolest part-time job, but it's so hard to go from that to actually making your own career out of it. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you had to prove yourself constantly.
Yeah, definitely. Like I would have been quite conscious about my age for a good few years at the beginning, mainly because I was worried that people, when they heard your age, would assume that you had a lack of experience or a lack of knowledge or whatever it might be. So like when you're 16, 17, 18, playing against those who are like early 30s, naturally you feel a bit like, oh God, like a bit of an imposter. But actually it was brilliant because I got all that experience in so early. Being 16, starting was a great leaping bound then I suppose to creating a career from it. So I worked part-time on counter with Urban Decay. I went on to do Mac in Grafton Street part-time. At that stage I had started my degree, so I studied commerce and French for 4 years. Absolutely loved that. But I was very lucky that I kind of had this career that I could do on the side. So I suppose like it took a lot of hard work as well. I missed a lot of weekends with my friends. I was always working every Saturday and Sunday, which were our days off.
Yeah.
But I loved it. So I kept working for myself part-time, built up my own client base, did a lot of teaching, press shoots, great variety. And that eventually led me to starting a brand. So I mixed a bit of the business degree into the makeup side of things.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask. You said you went on to college and studied commerce. Why did you
Yes.
go down that route instead of going down maybe doing a beauty course? Was there any reason, or just kind of broaden your knowledge?
So I think for me, I was always a nerd in school. I always wanted like all A's, no mess. Like if you told me I wasn't, I was devastated. So I knew that I was going to continue on the academic path. Um, I had always considered business. I loved languages in school. So for me, the Commerce International was a great avenue to explore both. But I suppose I didn't think to go on to study beauty because at that stage I'd been working in it for 4 years. So it was kind of an unusual case. Like even when I went to Mac, I was definitely the youngest on the counter, but that was purely a byproduct of having started and been given the opportunity when I was so young. So I was really lucky. I actually did go on to do a teaching certificate and an assessing certificate to open the makeup academy. So I kind of did it the reverse way around, where I studied and
You got
worked
here in the
practically.
end.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So yeah, I always kind of wanted to pursue a degree in business. So that's why I went with that.
and did you enjoy your college life?
Absolutely loved it. Like I actually feel so sad that I'm never going to be in college again. We also had to do an Erasmus as part of our degree because we had the language, and that was the best year ever. And I was so nervous. Like I was only saying this, I was doing a talk with UCD students recently, and I was so terrified of Erasmus. So like I was like, what, 20 years of age in college? Like I wasn't a baby anymore, but I was so terrified. I was such a home bird. You know, I'm an only child, single mum, that I went into my officer in UCD and was like, hiya, I'm actually not going to France next year, so I'm going to drop to normal commerce so you can just change my degree. And she was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, I've thought about it. I'm not going, too scared. No, not for me, not happening.
Yeah.
And then something clicked kind of a few months later, and I ended up like, my mom was obviously like, would you get a life and get going? You'll love it.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely the best year I ever had. But like that fear was so intense. But then I ended up absolutely loving it.
Yeah, because sometimes the fear does really hold you back. And I know you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but you know, imposter syndrome, you are a successful entrepreneur at the moment, but did you ever have those moments where you're like, I'm not good out for this, especially, you know, starting so young in a beauty counter? I'm sure that feeling came over you a good couple of times.
Totally. And I think like everyone experiences it in different ways. So like I was, like I said, working alongside a lot of people who were like ultra experienced and ultra creative, had all these like successes in their careers to date in terms of like maybe fashion weeks or fashion shows or awards, or just having a loyal client base on the counter, having been there for so long. So you are up against that. And I think it goes in any sort of industry that you go into, or any sort of working environment, you know, when you are that kind of younger one. But I think you just have to have or find that confidence inside of you. And then when you do, and you realize actually that you're good at what you do and you have a skill for it, that overcomes any sort of age barrier or imposter syndrome barrier or anything like that. But I think sometimes you do feel it in your stomach and you might be like, oh, I want the crowd to swallow me up, but then it's all fine after a while.
It is sometimes, you know, faking it till you make it. And then all of a sudden you just realize that you've all this experience under your belt and you're like, where does that come out of?
Yeah, totally. I remember my first fashion week, I was absolutely petrified, and I was like sweating under my jacket trying to hold my makeup brushes beside all these artists, but I was like just totally putting on the best show of my life. Like, yeah, this is no problem. All those photographers, yeah, no worries. Like terrified. But it was actually brilliant.
How do you get to Fashion Week? Simple question.
So that was through Mac. So Mac, like I said, it was probably my best experience from a counter perspective because it had just so many avenues in so many directions. They are just a fantastic kind of training technique brand. So I only worked with them for a year because I had to prioritize my own freelance after a while, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time there.
Wow, a year and you got to Fashion Week. That's insane. And you obviously have a very successful range of products at the moment. The likes of, you know, Holly Willoughby and Tess Daly are wearing your products. How do you get women like that to use your products? How do you get it in front of them?
It's still so surreal. I think for us, because we are a brand built by a makeup artist, we naturally probably gravitate towards makeup artists as well. So there are so many skilled makeup artists around the world working on all these gorgeous faces, and that's essentially how those two lovely women were wearing it. But it was such a pinch me moment, like as in, you know, people are like, oh yeah, you own your brand, you must be like, you know, keep it cool or whatever. I lost it. I was like, oh my god, this is so amazing, like sending it into all my WhatsApp groups. It was so exciting.
It must be the kind of thing that gets like, you know, goosebumps up in your hands and stuff. And do you celebrate those little moments as well? Like, did you do something for yourself when that happened?
So I'd say I'm probably guilty of that. I think anyone who runs their own business or is an entrepreneur or involved in a startup or whatever term you want to put on it, I personally don't probably celebrate the small wins enough. And I'm trying to do that more, and not even for myself, but for the sake of my team, because you're obviously trying to celebrate them and the work that they've done. I am very much someone like, you know, by the time you reach that target, I'm already gone to the next one, which I know is part and parcel about why, you know, you have a business and you keep pushing. But I do think that I've tried to learn, particularly over the last year, to take stock a bit more and celebrate what happens when it does, because they are big moments, even if you are clouded by everything that's going on, you know.
Of course, and I
in
think
terms
it's
of
one thing this COVID cloud has brought us is, that we do need to celebrate those little moments, because at the moment that's kind of all we
absolutely.
have, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And like those kind of small things that we probably would have taken for granted. Like I always say, for me over the last year with the pandemic, and like, don't get me wrong, it's a huge year that has shifted lives in so many ways. And thankfully I haven't been badly affected by it. But for me, small things like going for a walk before work or on my lunch break, cooking at home and not just buying a convenience meal because I'm so busy at work. Like those things have actually changed how I live so much. And they're so simple. If you'd said to me a year ago you're going to do those things, I'd be like, yeah, that's not a big deal. But
Yeah.
they make it so much more enjoyable for your day to day. So I've definitely tried to appreciate the small things, like you said, and the kind of more trivial day to day things that actually make a difference to your pace of
Yeah,
life.
and kind of be present with them as well, because that's one thing I did too. I started a lot of journaling during lockdown because I just had nothing else to do. But I think it's just like, yeah, being present, and also just getting off the phone too. Like I was a devil for being on the
I know.
phone while I was sitting there having the dinner with people I love, and it's like, no, there's more to life
I
than that.
know. Yeah, I know. And then you get the text in. I have like a screen thermometer where it's like, you have spent X amount of hours. And I'm like, oh God, that's awful.
And you seem like such a waste, but obviously it's not for you. Then that kind of leads me nicely onto the next section. Like you have a massive and a loyal following on Instagram. Do you find the pressure to always be on?
Yeah, I think that's the thing with social media. I think there's so many amazing positives to it. Like for me, in my perspective with having a business, you have instant connection to your customers, you have instant feedback, you have a great community spirit where like they feel like you're approachable, you're there to help them, we're there to empower them in terms of how to use the product. So there's so many amazing elements like that to it. But I think for me, I kind of started having like my own personal page. Now the brand has a page, and obviously I've got a team to help me with the brand side of things because it's so busy. But there is an element of you're always on and
Yeah.
you're always available to people. And, like I always say, if someone had a question about their Zara top, they're not going to email Mr. Zara, whereas they can message us, which is amazing that approachability and connectivity is there. But it does put a bit of added pressure on. So like some weekends, now I am getting better at it though. I think it's your own personal decision to switch off, turn the phone off, like you said, do a bit of a digital detox or take a few hours and just have it on mute. And it is possible. You can always get back to people. It's not as if you're letting anyone down if you don't respond in the first 30 minutes of their message. So I'm getting a bit better at that, particularly on the weekends when, even though albeit I'm doing nothing but dinners and walks, it's nice to actually, like you said, be present for those dinners and walks and have that time.
Yeah,
Switching
as
off.
I said, the difference with kind of your brand and say, you see the likes of Suzanne Jackson, even Charlotte Tilbury, people buy into the person as much as they buy into the brand as well. So it's kind of, they like you and they like your products and they like how you do your looks as well as, the brand. So it is kind of difficult to find that balance sometimes.
Yeah. I think as well, like outside of people liking to see the looks, they kind of like to see the story. Like we would get a lot of great feedback online, even when people like seeing, the team behind it, like that actually like there's people that make this machine run. So I think people find that really interesting. They definitely connect better with a brand when they understand more about why it's there, what it does, and who's behind it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like I said, like it is definitely a bigger positive than it is a negative. But I do think it's up to us individually to take time out when you need to, or else you'll just always be on.
Yeah, totally. And just like kind of control yourself. And say like, if there's anyone watching that wants to maybe start a brand, it's so hard to push yourself out there. What kind of tips do you have for them? Do you just say, just do it?
Yeah, well, that's one of the biggest things I would always say. Like, one of the most common questions I get asked is, how did you have the nerve at 22, like, just to do it? Like, as in, did you have a mentor? Did you have an investor, anything like that? And the honest answer is, I did not overthink it. So, and I'm not saying that in a flimsical way of like, don't analyze your risks and don't know your financials and all that. But like, I just was like, I'm going to do this product. I know exactly what I'm going to create and I'm going to go for it. And I didn't really think too far beyond what my starting point was. So I didn't give myself a chance to get freaked out by it.
Yeah.
But I definitely think for anyone who's thinking of a brand or maybe a passion project, that the word passion is really key there, that you know exactly what you want from it, that you totally believe in it, that you maybe know your brand identity, how you want it to look, what you want it to do, and then everything else will follow. Once you're absolutely in love with it and this is going to be amazing, people will feed off that passion. I always say. But you definitely have to believe in yourself. That's a big one.
And they probably do feed off, obviously if you're passionate about it and if you love this product, that love does seep through and people are going, well, I need to try this. I need to give this a go because she obviously is raving about it. I know from back to Insta, a lot of people yesterday on Insta, obviously on the kind of most recent Caroline Flax and 1 year anniversary, the Be Kind movement is still sort of going strong. How do you deal with criticism or trolls, or do you find you get many of them at all?
So I would consider myself really lucky where I don't get a lot. Now, I always say that doesn't mean that it's not happening behind my back, but face to face, I don't get a lot. But it's probably also a reflection of my not sharing too much of like the very personal stuff. I kind of share my day to day in work, but maybe not lots of other layers that people could find and attack with. But I've definitely seen it. And obviously like once or twice I've seen a comment that I'm like, whoa, Jesus, that's harsh. And I always think like, social media and the kind of general online spaces has allowed this culture where like people are so brave to say whatever they want. And I'm always like, take a stock and say, would you walk up to someone on the street and actually say that? And if you would, then you're crazy. And if you wouldn't, why do you feel that you can ride it? So I really think that people need to remind themselves that even if like this certain page has a lot of followers or they have a lot of kudos that you think from a brand perspective or an influencer perspective or a person perspective, they are a human, like they are a person. So they get affected by things like even me still with the brand, if anything was to go wrong or if we did something that, a delivery was delayed and a customer is really upset, like I get so affected by it because it's almost like a personal, oh God, I did this, and I don't think people think about that. They think like, oh, that's just a bigger brand. Whereas at the end of the day, there's humans behind it. So
yeah, totally. And like behind every, paid collaboration, there is a person behind every account who has family and friends who absolutely adore them. So it's just kind of just being selective with your words and just not being an ass, to be honest, if I could put it that bluntly.
And I always say like if they are more selective with their words and they're kinder, they have to feel better for that. Like you can't feel good from attacking someone on a troll perspective after. And if you do, then you need to have a chat with yourself.
Yeah, like I know, and look, I know we're all human, we all have those sort of ups and downs, but I know when I am feeling that awful, not that I would criticize, but it's something in yourself. And I think you need to like look at yourself first and be like, look, I'm obviously unhappy if I'm thinking these things. So, I need to work on that myself. And it actually has nothing to do with that person.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that definitely comes with age. Like when I think back to like even pre-social media world, when you were in school, certain situations that happen when you're in school, it's really hard to have that rationale to say, you know what, that person isn't very sure about themselves. So I'm not going to take that personally and I'm going to walk on from it. Because at that age, well, certainly in our instance, you did take it personally and you did react to it. And even if it was outside of social. So I think that's like the lovely way to look at it. But I do think that comes easier with age for me anyway.
That's very true. And I know it's kind of easier said than done. And it's probably life experiences now that have made me that person. But definitely back when I was in school, you do things, take a lot of things to heart. But I think it's just, trying to maybe take a step back from social media or whatever is causing to just give it a go. You're your own boss at the moment with Sculpted by Aimee. What is your favorite thing about that and about kind of running a team?
So I suppose I've never really known any other way. Like I've never worked in a corporation, whether that's a good or bad thing. I love the thrive of having like your unit. You've got your team. I consider them like my Sculpted family. So there's something lovely about that, to feel like you are in a sense providing for these people's livelihoods and like they're profiting from what you're creating from a brand. So there's a really nice feeling in that. And I'm really like so lucky with the team that I have. They all get on really well and they're really passionate about the brand, which I think is so important in a startup.
Totally.
I think for me, like it's funny, like people often think, oh, sure, you work for yourself, sure, you could just take the week off, no bother. And it's like the total opposite. You're actually like, you're never off, you're always on. But I absolutely love what I do. And I think that's the secret for anyone who's going to work for themselves. You can't do it unless you're absolutely obsessed with what you're doing, because it is relentless, but in a great way. But I think for me, the biggest thing that I would work on solely, I suppose, myself with no other team members, is a new product development in terms of liaising with factories and stuff. So that can be really exciting. Obviously extremely frustrating at times, but really exciting when you see like your concept come back from the lab and you see your first sample and you try and you're like, oh my God, it's amazing, or there might be a few tweaks, and then when you see it actually arrive on shelf, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that must be. Do you ever remember the first time you saw one of your products on a shelf somewhere? Did you have like a little freak out inside?
Yes, I actually walked by the shop and didn't go in. I was so embarrassed because my face
No.
is on the stand and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do here. What if everyone's like, is that you? You don't look like the same person. But I also had a freak out moment when I was going to my first buyer's meeting. And it was about 3 months before the product had launched. It was my very, very first product. So I didn't have that feeling of it being on shelf yet. I was still working through the list to kind of get there. And I remember walking into the pharmacy to go up to the office and passing a shelf like I've done 5 million times before of all the products on it. And I remember getting this sinking feeling of like, oh my God, I've been so focused on like getting the product here, getting it into stores, that I hadn't considered the next part, which is when it's in store, you need to make sure it sells. And that was a real daunting moment of like, oh God, this is the next level now of everything I have to do. But thankfully, touch wood, 4 years on, it's all good.
Well, they're good products, so that's what makes the difference, you know.
Yeah.
You mentioned how, people think, oh, if I'm my own boss, I can work 3 hours a day and then I can have 5 days off. How do you motivate yourself on those days where you're just not feeling kind of up to it? Because like anyone who's in maybe a 9 to 5 or who working as a teacher or working, in somewhere that they have set hours, you just have to go in and just do it. So how do you motivate yourself? Because I know, as you said, you have to be so passionate about it, but you could easily be like, I'm the boss, I could take today off. Like, how do you, on those days, how do you just give yourself that kick in the ass, we'll say?
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, given that we are very involved in the online space and we've been able to kind of adapt the business slightly in terms of rituals, we've got launches and stuff, it's genuinely so busy that it would be great to have a day where I was like, you know what, actually, I'm not going to bother, but it just never happens. But I definitely feel like, particularly this kind of lockdown that we're in, I think has been the trickiest for some people in terms of motivation. And we're kind of feeling like we're doing the same thing again and it's all a bit monotonous. I think for me, lists are brilliant. So if I feel a little bit like all over the shop, or I might be kind of tired or maybe feeling a bit demotivated because life is kind of demotivating, that I find writing a list of kind of, good things that I can actually actively get done the next day is great. And it gives you a bit of focus and a bit of structure. So I prefer doing that before I go to sleep at night rather than I wake up in the morning, because I kind of go to sleep with a clear head. So everyone kind of has a different preference. But that for me is a really good activity to make sure I'm staying on the track of what I need to do. Obviously we have a lot of team calls, so that's great because you have to be present for them. And then also, like, if I'm having a morning where I feel a bit crap, like, go for a walk and get a tea. Like, don't be rushing for the 9 a.m. start if it's not happening, and if it's 10 a.m., that's fine. You're starting on a better note.
That's it. And again, with COVID, that's one thing that we've kind of realized as well. It's so funny you said that. I do the exact same thing. And I think my housemates think I'm cracked because I was right there and I write my little list of things I have to do and I go to sleep and I'm happy out. But it is, I think
And it has to be handwritten.
it has to be handwritten. Oh no, on the phone now. I need to reduce my screen time. So I'm like, no, I spend too much time on the phone on Instagram, never mind anything else. But yeah, I always handwrite it. And like I always do, it's such a small thing, but I do a little box so that I can tick it afterwards. And it's such a small thing. I'm
Nice.
like, dear.
I don't do that. I must involve that now in my next list.
I just like the little satisfaction of ticking it off and happy out. Your company, and as an entrepreneur, you've had so much successes. Is there anything that you haven't done yet that you're like, this is the next thing I want, this is my next goal?
Yeah. I feel like we haven't even done 1% of what I want to do. No, I'm really joking. We've obviously had great moments and it's brilliant to have had this so far. But I think, like, for any ambitious business, there's always a huge list beyond things that you achieve. So for me, like, we're focusing on the UK market now. So we launched there online late last year. That's a huge market of opportunity and also challenges as well, like anything. So looking at kind of our on-counter space in stores, so like other makeup artist brands would be, is something in my line of sight. And then also expansion. So growth and expansion are two big things. So looking at new markets and how we grow the Sculpted community a bit more beyond Ireland.
Well, if that's only 1% of what we've seen so far, I can't wait till you do, world domination. And
Yeah,
finally,
we'll get
Aimee,
there soon.
I'll end it on this one. If you could, speak to 14-year-old Aimee right now, and she was sitting in front of you, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to believe in herself more. I was a very kind of shy, self-doubting kid up until I was about maybe 17, and that came with, you know, working on counter and having a job and being forced to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So it grew and grew. But also not to care as much what people think. And to be honest, that is actually still something that I'm learning 14 years later, even if I was speaking to my 14-year-old self. So I think that could be a real venom in people, where you're so conscious of like pleasing everyone, or, you know, making sure that you don't do anything that's, you know, putting other people out, whereas sometimes what you end up doing is overstretching yourself. So trying not to care as much what other people's opinions are, especially if you don't know them, because it doesn't actually have any bearing on you as a person, and believing in yourself more. And as a very small side note, don't give up team sport. One of my biggest regrets. What was I doing? Like, thought I was, oh, listen, I'm 15 now, I'm too cool. And I only really got back into exercise last year.
What did you give up, to mind me asking?
I gave up everything really. Like, I used to do a bit of running. I was doing camogie, so I went to Clothiscone, which is an Irish school, or Gaelga. So we did camogie there. I did dancing. I absolutely loved dancing. Gave that up. I was like a nut job.
I know. I kept it going now, I would say, through school, but then through college, I discovered other passions, i.e. night out. And, you know, and I thought to then, and I was like, you idiot. Like, I've actually only in my grand old age now gotten back to it. And I was like, I love this. And I think
that's great to get back to it.
Yeah, I went back to playing Gaelic football. Now I am the slowest person on the team, but that's okay. But that's very true. I think I would tell my 14-year-old self that as well. So thank you so much, Aimee.
Yeah. Not at all. Thanks so much for having me.